great. Oh, that's wonderful. I'm so excited. So, hi, my name's Isis, and I am going to be giving my presentation / talk tonight on Dia de los Muertos. I tried to make a funny reference, Bring Out Your Dead, but I'm not entirely sure people have seen Monty Python. But if you have, wonderful. Anyway, so yeah, this is what. All right, that's me. I have to do this. Hold on. All right, so quick bio. My name is Isis, and I am. I was instructed to explain why I know what I know, and I am 25% Tex, 75% Mex, which Tex Mex. And how do I qualify myself as a Day of the Dead know-it-all? Well, I'm going to give you the same answer that Guillermo del Toro gave when he was asked about how he can find the balance between the terrible things in his movies and like depravity, but also find the balance and the joy in himself. And that is simply that he is Mexican, porque soy mexicana. Because no one loves life more than we do, because we are so conscious about death. And I definitely identify with that. I'm just going to throw my notes around the floor, so sorry, just ignore me. All right, cool. So, let's start right off the bat in dispelling what Dia de los Muertos is not. It is not Mexican Halloween, because Halloween is a Celtic tradition. While both Halloween and Dia de los Muertos hold common imagery like skulls or death, one of them employs costumes to scare away ghouls and ghosts that you don't want around, right? And for Mexico, for Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, that's the time to invite people in, the souls of your ancestors that have gone on. Also, it's not ancestor worship either. So I think there's a really big importance in the semantics of it, because worship is a way to show love, to show honor, to show obedience to someone or something, a higher power, who deserves your highest regard, in your opinion. But veneration is holding something as holy or secret, something that has really great value to you. And I bring veneration up because it does come into play later on over who we can make an ofrenda to, right? So, I guess on that one too. All right, so next up, so what is it? It is a temporary return of the souls of the deceased to visit the world of the living, to be with their relatives and to nourish themselves with the food the essence of the offerings in their honor. But we'll talk about the words. Can someone remind me the difference between ofrenda and altar later on? Because I forgot to put it in my presentation. Leah, I'm assigning that to you. Maybe not. All right. So, POV, your dead will indigenous. Death, we don't know her, right? Because death is a transition. It's not a state of being. It's merely just a moment where you transition from this world to the next, right? And if I know that, or seen here in westernized cultures, traditionally, we experience life and death, we tend towards the linear and the chronological. First you have death, first you have life, first you have life, and then you have death, and then there's some kind of afterlife. And some people call it heaven, some people call it paradise. But if you're indigenous, or if you're part of the Aztec groups or the Mayans, death exists in a very dynamic and complementary way that progresses parallel to life. So think of it as like a proto-multiverse, almost. So both life and death in the indigenous tradition are a journey. It's continuous, it's never ending, and it feeds into itself, kind of like a really shitty Mobius strip. Moving on. Or a good one, depending on where you end up and how you die. Which is also the next point. The manner in which you die decides where you end up. So Aztecs and Mayans both believed that the manner of your death decided what journey you took in the afterlife, right? Kind of like a Grim Reaper sorting hat almost. So if you died as a warrior, or if you died as a sacrificial victim, or if you died in childbirth, you would end up in donativo. You want me to spell it? I'm sorry. You're good. All right, hold on. There you go. I'm sorry. All right. It's the place of the sun. And it's interesting to point out that for women who pass in childbirth in this particular belief system, is that they were seen as having lost a battle with their unborn child. So, with that said, your manner of death decides where you end up in the afterlife. And you could end up in one of the 13 heavens, or actually 9, but we'll review that in a minute. Or you could end up in one of the 9 levels of the underworld, which is called Mictlan. M-I-C-T-L-A-N. Sorry. All right, so, oh my God, there's too much going on up here. So we're going to touch real quickly on the good, which is the 13 heavens. And I'm kind of blow through this part because I actually put 20 notes on this, I'm sorry. So the first, or the lowest heaven, is the place where the moon traveled. The second heaven is the place of the stars. The third is the heaven of the sun. The fourth is the place where Venus can be seen. The fifth is comets or smoking stars. The sixth and the seventh are where you can only see the colors green and blue, or in some different tribes it would be black and blue. So it's kind of like relates to heaven or heaven and heavens of day and night. There we go. And the eighth was the place of storms, and then everything above that was reserved for the gods. Right? It was and it's called Omeyokan. Omeyokan. O-M-E-Y-O-C-A-N. Sorry. All right. I want to say next slide, but it's actually just me with the next slide. So here's the bad. If you were with the Chuzma or with anybody else, the peasants, you would end up in the underworld at the very beginning of Mictlan. And there's 9 levels that you have to get through to get to the big bosses of the underworld. And I'm going to try to say this, and I'm so sorry if I don't say it correctly. Mictlan Tecuitli and Mictecaquihuatl. I don't speak Nahuatl, sorry. So the 9 levels of the underworld that you would have to cross are the place where, for crossing the water, the place where the hills are found. You would have to cross through an obsidian mountain. You'd have to cross through obsidian wind or rain. Oh, too fast. Whoops. There's also the place where the banners are raised, the place where people are pierced with arrows, the place where people's hearts are devoured, the obsidian place of the dead, and then finally the place where smoke has no outlet. And that's at the very, very end. So once you get through all of these 9 levels of Mictlan, you end up in Chikuna Mictlan, which is the house of the dead. And here you overcame death. There's a couple of different approaches to it. So you could overcome death by outwitting the gods, or at the very end, if your soul's purpose is done, if you are done with whatever you were meant to be here on this plane, then you didn't die, you just disappeared. You were gone. Your soul is finally at rest. But if your purpose hadn't been fulfilled, you would just start all over again. Kind of like the shitty Mario Brothers. Actually, sorry, that's what I was thinking when I was doing this. But anyway, so, all right. But what's going to happen? How do you get through all those levels? Well, you can actually take stuff with you, because it is dangerous to go alone. You can take food, you can take chocolate, cacao, you could take obsidian, you could take weapons, you could take tools like rope, sisal rope, and you could take your little dog too. So that's one of the things that actually is pretty prevalent. Oh my goodness. Give me 1 second. That's one of the things that has kind of continued since this the idea of Day of the Dead started, is that dogs were believed to already know the way through the underworld and they accompany the dead on their journey. So if you were loved by a dog in the present, there's a good chance that once you get to the end of this life or this cycle and this is what you believe in, that dog is going to be waiting for you to help you, to guide you through all those 9 levels, which I think that's real cute. That's all right. So, how did we get from this? Oh, I'm gonna try the little thing here. How do we get from this beautiful tapestry of Mesoamerican cultures and wonderful ideas to nothing like it, something completely different? Well, 2 words, 4 syllables. These people. Hold on. Oh, and in honor of Columbus Day, please feel free to boo this man. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So it was and still remains one of the supreme facts of Mexican history. With the arrival of the Spanish, it destroyed almost all continuity between an Amerindian Mesoamerican identity and basically the present. And it still left us, when I say us, I say people like me who are brown, who are Latino, Hispanic, Mexican, it left us as the other through our appearances, like our visage, our features, and also our skin color. And over time, much of what were indigenous traditions and this beautiful culture ended up just getting whitewashed. And along, with Catholic syncretism, these traces began to disappear, including indigenous celebrations. And just to give you an idea of how complete the total decimation of the Amerindian and Mesoamerican culture was, none of the images that I've shown you that looked historic, none of those were created by indigenous people. Those were all created by Spanish folks. It's going to be in the Florentine Codex. It's going to be in drawings made by friars like Friar Diego Duran. But very little actually survived from the Spanish conquest. I'm talking like actual book burnings, like paper burnings. Everything was burned. Everything was destroyed. And we're actually really lucky to even have whatever the Spanish thought was reasonable. Ooh, them too. Anyway, moving forward. If you fast forward 400 years, and we get this dude. Nobody knows who he is. That's okay. This is Lázaro Cárdenas. He's one of the president. He was a former president of the United States of Mexico, and he's actually a really key player, in my opinion, because he believed in indigenismo, which is translated loosely indigeneity. It's an ideology that emphasizes the relationship between the nation state, the indigenous states, and the indigenous people. And Lázaro Cárdenas, he's actually pretty controversial in Mexican history, but he had a genuine desire to highlight indigenous voices in post-revolutionary Mexico. So I think time-wise, he's like right after Roosevelt, before Hitler. It's like kind of like right in that very strange, blurred space. I'm sorry, I'm really nervous. But anyway, so he did actually focus a lot of the national attention on indigenous people and on their plights. To wit, he created the Department of Indigenous Affairs. He redistributed lands among the indigenous people, which created ejidos. There were these like administrative units that incorporated the indigenous communities, and some would argue that perhaps maybe that might not have been the best idea, and it may have done a little bit more harm than good, but that's actually another presentation on its own. So anyway, he did seek to elevate indigenous voices and indigenous people within Mexican society, and in doing so directly helped ensure that that focus came back to indigenous traditions, like Dia de los Muertos, and it became a beloved holiday. So anyway, let's see here. Oh my gosh, I have so many notes. So moving on. So back to the conquest, actually. One of the things that I did put in my notes was that he actually ended the persecution against Catholics. I bet y'all didn't know that in Mexico, prior to Lázaro Cárdenas, there was this huge movement of like anti-religion, like anti-organized religion, where priests and clerics were being murdered, they were being dragged out in the streets and beaten. They're like, no, fuck this guy. But no, so that ended up happening, and Lázaro Cárdenas was like, no, y'all, we can't, that's not cool. And that kind of, I'm going to think of it as like a Venn diagram of like perfect timing, or it might have been a perfect storm, maybe a better allegory to this. But yeah, so with that said, you have a lot of Catholic syncretism and a lot of Spanish syncretism within Day of the Dead, within Mesoamerican and Amerindian traditions. Sorry. So, for example, you have Tlaxochimalco, which is an Aztec festival for deceased children. That's going to be in August, and it's 20 days. It was actually just boiled down to All Souls Day, which is November 1st. Or you have Huehuetlacayhuitl, which is, I think he's the guy that greets you, but don't quote me on that right now. But that guy's entire feast month was also boiled down to All Saints Day. And then there's also the idea of ancestors serving as intermediaries between the living and the gods. And then that translated over to Catholic saints. You have Mictlantecuhtli, which is a god, which is one of the gods that meets you at the very end of Mictlan. and he's dressed in paper vestments. So that translated over to a big picado. And then you have human sacrifices. The human sacrifices very simply just translates over to bread that looks like dead people, which is actually a thing. Anyway, all right. So moving on to everyone's favorite part, the anatomy of ofrenda. So how do we build this ofrenda? Well, you need to have a couple of things. You need to have the elements represented. You have wind, and we've got this is papel picado, so I'm just gonna, and from what I remember, not going off my notes here, sorry guys, it's supposed to transition that, it's supposed to represent that veil between the living and the dead. And that's why it's so thin, it's tissue thin, it's easily permeated, yet there's always something on the other side that you really can't see too well, right? You also have water, and you can just have that represented by a jar or a glass of water. The element of fire is represented by the candles, and the element of earth is represented by flowers and fruit and bread. You also have a bunch of other items too. You have salt, you have sugar skulls, you have copal, you have cempasúchil, you also have this whole list. I'm actually going to go through how to actually put the whole thing together in a little bit. I'm going to go a little bit faster because we're about to run out of time. But yeah, and all of these have a different meaning. All of these items, they do mean something. So you would have copal or you would have incense to kind of purify that space that you're in. Just so that way, think of it as a celebration of welcoming your ancestors back from a really long trip. And you don't treat them as dead, you treat them as existing, as living, right there with you, right next to you. So with salt, it represents purity. Salt is a purifying element. You have sugar and you have chocolate skulls. The skull, of course, represents death, and the sugar and the chocolate, I think that just kind of like to sweeten the deal. Cempasúchil is actually really important. I don't know if anyone has ever grown marigolds, but them fuckers stink. They smell really bad. They actually, I would venture to say, they smell like death. Because they're terrible, and the crushing of those petals and laying them out, that is actually a way to beckon your ancestors in. It's a way for them to recognize, oh, hey, this is a home that I'm going to stop in. This is a home that is my home. This is where my family lives, right? So it's meant to guide the soul's home. Also, we have food. Food, well, it's for your family, basically. It's like cooking for your family and then just telling them to leave after 24 hours in some traditions. But yeah. So, I bet some of y'all, show of hands, how many of y'all thought that Day of the Dead was only 1 or 2 days? It's not. It's not. It's actually like a whole week. It's like 6 or 7 days. First you have October 27th. That's when we start. And that's when we celebrate our pets that have gone on. It's real cute, I know, real sad. And then on October 28th, sometimes you celebrate your drowning victims. On October 29th, we remember the tragic or accidental deaths and the souls that we've lost. On the 30th, we remember the forgotten souls. On the 31st, we celebrate and remember the unborn. On November 1st, we remember and celebrate the souls of children that are deceased. And then finally, November 2nd, we have Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. So, I'm going to try to go as quick as I can because I've only got like a minute left, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. All right. So, kind of thinking back to where we were before, on the 27th, where we start with our pets, where would you put your little ofrenda for your pet, your offering? You put it on the floor. That's where you start, on the floor there. You would place their food in the food bowl and their water there, and perhaps even a picture. On the 28th, this is when you light the first candle, and you put flowers. And this is supposed to welcome lost souls. I know I had said drowning victims. That's kind of also part of the whole being unable to tell what is correct and what isn't, just because everything has been so severed. We lost so much. We've lost so much in the conquest that a lot of people's versions of what Day of the Dead is. There's like a big Venn diagram, and in the middle is the truth, but it's actually one of the ones that has like the 4 circles on it. But anyway, moving on. All right, so the second day, you would light your second candle, and this would be for the tragic or accidental deaths, and you would place water, because they have traveled a long way, they've come to see you, you're remembering them, and you want them to be welcome in your home. And the first thing I want to do whenever I walk a whole fucking long way, I want a glass of water, okay? Or something. Maybe margarita, it's fine. All right, so then we have the Forgotten Souls, which is going to be on the 4th day. You don't actually have to put these in like the exact order. I'm just kind of going through it, y'all. But for the Forgotten Souls, this is the day that you remember and you celebrate those that no longer have anyone to pray for them or to remember them. And for this, it makes me think of like, well, because I'm Mexican, possibly the people that are lost in the deserts when they're crossing. And you don't really know that they exist, you don't know where they are, you don't know their names, they're just kind of dead there. So this is a good way to like honor that memory, regardless if you don't know who they are. All right. Oh, and you leave out bread for them because more than likely they passed without a final meal. Oh, and that's pan de muerto. It's supposed to look like little finger bones. It's really good. I'll share a recipe if you want. Alright, and then we move on to the 31st, which is when you celebrate the unborn. And for that, we light a candle, we light another candle, and you place fruits. Now, I would venture to guess that there's like a link there between fruits and fruits of the womb, and that's why we place fruits on that day. It's said that the gates of heaven are said to open up at midnight on the 31st, which would then allow the spirit of the children to come back and visit their families, visit their homes for 24 hours, which is really specific, but anyway. Which leads us into November 1st, and that's when you would light another candle, and you would put candy, and you would put toys, and that particular day in the Catholic tradition is called All Souls Day. And then once you get to the 2nd, which is the real Day of the Dead, that's All Saints Day for Catholics, and that's when you would put everything else out. You would light another candle. Try not to burn the place down, of course. You would add their favorite food, add their vices, or even add some tequila. I put tequila because that's what I want. Not that I'm playing anything. Sorry. Dark humor. All right. So anyway, my favorite part about this is the psychological impact of celebrating Dia de los Muertos. It allows you this really great communion with the departed. It allows you to, it offers you an emotional and a spiritual connection with those that have gone before you, those that you may not have gotten to know. It allows us to be less fearful of our approach to death, and be more accepting of the cycle of life and death. And my therapist would be really super proud of this. It lets us hold space for ourselves and for others to grieve with joy. Shout out, Deanne. All right, so I'm going to finish this up. Oh my God. So sometimes I've heard this. I'm a Mexican, not a Mexican. Am I still allowed to put up an ofrenda? Well, is it cultural appropriation? I'm going to tell you, as a Mexican, no. Don't even worry about it. But there are 2 rules to having an ofrenda. 1, they got to be dead. And 2, they had to have meant something to you, right? I actually had somebody ask me if they could put up like a politician that was still living, and I was like, no, but maybe you killed him. Just kidding. TSA or NASA, NSA, not NASA. All right, but no. So it doesn't matter. Truly. They had to have meant something to you, they just have to be dead, and there's your person. And it can be as big, it can be as little as you want it to be. It could be a shoebox, it could be a tiny little cardboard presentation, it could even be like the little thing that you cut out at school. Because the purpose is to welcome and draw your loved ones near. It's not about like showing off or whatever, it's about beckoning your ancestors who've gone before you and the people that have passed on, beckoning them home. And it can be your friends, it can be your neighbor, it could be And a really good example of this is the alternative examples of ofrendas to non-relatives. So you've got people building these crazy things to like Vicente Fernandez, to Jenny Rivera, Frida Kahlo, everywhere, everything. And you don't have to be a brown person to get an ofrenda. We've got Robin Williams over here. Which, by the way, R.I.P. Anyway. But also, yeah, and so you can make an ofrenda to anybody. They just have to be dead. They had to have meant something to you. And you can add whatever you want to put on that to make it special, to make sure that they come to you. Like, make it enticing, because it's your guest. It's your supernatural or whatever guest. And they're just here to visit you, and you only get to see them or be with them for that one day out of the year after death, their death. Also, and you can also have it to your little dog too. So I think that's it. I'm so sorry I may have gone over for a little bit. I'm just really excited to talk about this. But if you guys want to take a picture of this, this is like just a quick infographic that I found online. But yeah, that's my talk on Dia de los Muertos.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. Well, we'll take care of the paper in a moment, but for now, do we have questions from the audience?
Please make them easy.
All right, I see someone in the back. We're going to go that way and work our way forward. All right, here you go.
I'm just going to take over for whoever you asked to remind you to talk about the altar versus the front.
Oh, thank you for reminding me.
I want to know.
I appreciate you. Okay, so semantics are important. So remember, we talked a little bit about ancestor worship, and a lot of times people use the word altar and ofrenda interchangeably, and that's not correct. In my opinion, it's not correct, because altar implies that you are worshiping it, right? But an ofrenda, translated directly, that is an offering. You are offering bread, you're offering water, you're offering a resting space, you're offering communication, you're offering a visit to your ancestors. You're not worshiping them. You're not being super obedient. No, I sure wasn't, sorry. But yeah, thank you for reminding me. I appreciate that. I hope that answered your question.
Excellent start. All right, who's got the next question? All right, great.
So when you basically beckon them here, how do you have a send-off also?
So
At the end, do you have like a send-off?
No.
Or something?
You can. Well, really, it's just they kind of just go away. Like think of it as like an ebb and flow of an ocean. They just come in and they'll meet with you briefly, and they'll absorb the essence of whatever you're offering them, of their favorite food, of their little bonito or whatever, and then they'll just go away. That's it. Yeah, the veil is super thin, in my opinion. I have to say in my opinion a lot, because there's not a lot of records to like back up any of the research, because it was all just right up. Anyway.
All right, so we're 2 for 2 on good questions. Who's got our third question? Perfect. Don't let me down.
Howdy.
Hello. My question is, how homogeneous is Dia de los Muertos in the here and now? Because clearly these, well, I imagine at least, these traditions were quite disparate in the distant past.
I'm so sorry. He's shaking and I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you're kind of quiet.
How about now?
Perfect.
Great. How homogeneous is Dia de los Muertos now in the places where it's practiced? I imagine, this is my ignorance speaking, that beliefs across the areas where it was practiced, where it's now practiced, were quite heterogeneous in the past.
Yeah. So like how
Has that translated to now?
Yeah. So how similar is it from all the tribes in Mexico to present day? Is that kind of where?
Yeah, how does everyone do it the same way?
No, actually no. Thank you for asking that. That's a really good question. Absolutely not. So Mexico has its own Day of the Dead traditions and culture, and it seems that almost every Latin American country has its own a way to celebrate Dia de los Muertos. I can't speak on the other countries because I'm not in not everything else except Mexican. But every country, as far as I've seen, they do have separate celebrations, separate traditions, separate ways that they set up their own ofrendas. It might be similar, but certainly not the same. No, certainly not the same.
All
Thank you
right.
for asking. That's a really good question.
Yeah, we're getting a good crowd tonight. This is good stuff. Do we have one final question to wrap up? All right, excellent. What you got?
Hi, Isis.
Hi.
I always like to look to, media and talking about appropriation around it. It seems like Dia de los Muertos has been represented in so many different types of, film, TV, and I was wondering if you could give good examples of good representation of some good folks who got it, dead on right, and maybe some folks who maybe missed the mark a little bit, and I just like, through your eyes what that might look like. I bawled my eyes out seeing Coco in theaters a bunch of years
Yep.
back, having just lost my kindly Mexican grandma that same year, and I would just love to hear, what the spectrum looks like through your eyes on that.
Yeah. So actually, the moment you started saying like, is there a good representation of it? I was gonna say Coco. It's one of the very, very few, if only, movie I have ever seen that has a very, very good representation of what the underworld looks like, mostly, and the traditions related to Mexican Dia de los Muertos. As for the bad, the one I can think of right now off the top of my head, is it the James Bond movie?
That's what you
I hate that one, because like that's some bullshit right there. Like, how you gonna put a calavera and just like go down the street and start like ratatatai? Like, no, thank you. No, that's terrible. No, and it's not supposed to be fearful. That's the thing, is that I think from what you're saying is that sometimes the media or movies or films, they do portray the other Muertos as this like spooky thing. It's like mysterious and like, oh, we gonna get you. But no, it's not like that at all. It's actually very warm, very welcoming. You're supposed to be there to welcome your relatives back, not to scare the shit out of them and make them go away. I mean, some yes, if you don't like your aunt or uncle or whatever, which fuck them. But Coco was actually a really good representation of the culture itself, the approach to it, the toxic masculinity part of it. And what it looks like at the very end. So I love that movie so much. I've only seen it like twice because otherwise I will absolutely start like bawling,
Same.
like ugly cry. All right.
All right, let's thank our speaker.
Thanks,
That was fantastic. Such a great